Gunfire cracked through the night, tearing the silence of a Maryland suburban road, the blue and red police lights throwing reflections across the black SUV with military plates and lighting up Colonel Amelia Taylor's stunned face. For a moment, she could not process what had happened. She only felt her heart hammering in her chest and the smell of gunpowder mixing with the damp earth after the rain. On the asphalt, Officer Derek Hall collapsed, a dark red stain of blood spreading beneath the headlights. A red laser dot still pulsed on his chest, proof that the shot had not been an accident. The stretch of road fell into silence. Figures emerged from the shadows, dressed in black, moving fast and precise without a sound. One of them lowered a sniper rifle, stepped in front of Amelia, and spoke in a hoarse, steel, steady voice. "Secure the area, Colonel." Amelia looked at them, eyes a mix of astonishment and heavy resignation. She had ordered her security team not to follow, yet they were there. Part of her wanted to be furious, the rest understood that if they had not disobeyed orders, she might now be lying on the ground. 20 minutes earlier, Amelia had left Andrews Base, where she had just been promoted to command the Eastern Strategic Forces. 30 years of service, 4 deployments, 48 medals, and countless unseen injuries. Tonight, she only wanted to go to her mother's house, her mother from Savannah fighting terminal cancer. But when the police lights flashed behind her, instinct told her this was not a routine stop. Derek Hall approached the vehicle, rapped the glass with his baton, his gaze full of suspicion and contempt. "Get out of the car now." His voice was blunt, not a word of courtesy. Amelia wound down the window, keeping the calm tone of someone who had endured hundreds of life-or-death situations. "I am Colonel Amelia Taylor, United States Army. This is my identification." She slowly offered her ID, but Hall would not look. He drew his weapon, the black barrel trained at her forehead. "Don't play games, fake papers. Do you think I'm stupid?" In that moment, Amelia's fear was not of dying. It was the fear of a history repeating itself. She remembered her father's warning. "You may wear this country's uniform, but one day someone will see your skin before they see your rank." That humiliation had defined his life, and now it stood before his daughter. A laser flashed on Hall's chest from afar, but Amelia had no time to speak. A shot rang out crisp and cold. Hall fell like a puppet, with its strings cut. In that instant, she felt no victory, only a spreading cold in her chest. She knew the shot would not only kill a man, it would ignite a new war. The war between the military and the police, between honor and prejudice, between what people believed was right and what was truly right. A tactical team sealed the scene, headlights blazing like the set of a tragedy. They were Echo Unit, the military's covert protection detail, authorized to intervene only when a senior officer faced a threat. Yet tonight, they had broken protocol. Amelia recognized the Commander Major Adrian Ross, her loyal subordinate of many years. He bowed his head, his voice low and steady. "We could not stand by and watch you die, Colonel." Amelia nodded slightly, then looked at Hall's body. "Do you know what you have done?" "Ross, saved your life," he answered. "No, you have lit the fuse on a storm," she replied, her voice hoarse as old wind. Sirens grew louder in the distance, cutting through the strobe of blue and red, and in that flicker Amelia saw her own reflected face in the rearview mirror, serene on the surface, but eyes harboring a brewing storm. She understood that in a few hours, every national broadcast would carry the headline, "Police Shot by Military." They would call her many names, and no one would call her the woman who had spent a lifetime defending this country. In the dark, she whispered to herself, "If they want war, I will show them what justice looks like in war, and that Maryland night with a single shot split Colonel Amelia Taylor's life into, before and after the moment justice spoke. At dawn, the first rays of sunlight touched Andrews Air Force Base, but for Colonel Amelia Taylor, the sun did not rise. She sat alone in a temporary Defense Department conference room behind her, a fogged glass window in front of her 3 generals and a national security agent. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Only the ticking of the clock and the cold stares pressing down on her filled the air. General Harriman, she began, her voice unnaturally calm. I did not give the order to fire. The silver-haired man across from her raised an eyebrow. Then who did Colonel Echo unit they acted outside my command? The unit under your authority. The general replied, his tone cutting like a blade on wood, and the victim was a local police officer on American soil. Amelia took a deep breath. She knew she stood on a dangerous line, not just for her career, but for the honor of her entire command. The media had exploded overnight headlines, flooding every platform. Black female officer kills white cop. Conservative networks screamed that the military had overstepped civilian authority, while social media was split in 2 halves, calling for her prosecution, the other half hailing her as a symbol against racial injustice. In the cramped room, only she maintained her upright posture, hands clasped tightly until her knuckles turned white. No one asked how she felt, but in her mind, memories of childhood came rushing back. Savannah, Georgia, more than 40 years ago. Little Amelia sat by the window of their old house, listening to her father cough after the night shift at the factory. He had once been a Marine, had carried a rifle in Vietnam, but when he returned home, his veteran's card was not enough to get him hired as a bank guard. They told him flatly, "We don't hire black men in that uniform." He just smiled, took his daughter to the beach, and said, "They can deny you, but never let them take away your belief that you belong." Those words followed Amelia her entire life. At 18, she applied to West Point, though her high school counselor had advised her to learn a trade, something practical. The day she received her acceptance letter, she quietly placed it on that counselor's desk and said, "Only you were wrong." At the academy, she was treated as an outsider male. Cadets mocked her, instructors doubted her, even lowered her scores deliberately to test her real ability. During one night field exercise, they hid all her training ammunition to make her fail her tactical exam. But the next morning, Amelia appeared with a spotless M4 rifle, assembled and cleaned in the dark, and hit every target. From that day, no one dared underestimate her again. 30 years later, she still carried that same discipline. But life outside the battlefield was different out there. The enemy did not carry a gun, they carried prejudice. She had been investigated under false pretenses for connections with foreign organizations, when the truth was she had publicly supported gender equality in the military. Her promotion had been delayed 18 months, and each time people only smiled and said, "You understand, more evaluation is needed." Yet Amelia never lost her temper. She believed in justice, the very justice she had fought to protect, even when it did not protect her. Now sitting before the inquiry board, she felt the same contempt her father once endured. But, unlike him, she was no longer powerless. "I request access to Officer Derek Hall's personnel file," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "If he attacked me after I had identified myself as military, this was no longer an accident." A minute of silence followed. The national security agent, the youngest man in the room, shifted uneasily. "We have information that Officer Hall had prior disciplinary records 3 times. For what conduct, racial discrimination during duty, but all handled internally. not made public. The air turned heavy. Amelia closed her eyes and heard her father's voice echo in her mind. Justice does not exist on its own, it must be forced into existence. Outside rain began to patter lightly on the glass roof. Somewhere in the city, far right, groups were organizing rallies in support of the so-called fallen hero, while on the opposite side, civil rights activists were marching to defend the military heroine. The nation was splitting in half, and Amelia stood directly on the fault line. That night, back in her secure apartment in the senior officer's compound, she turned on the television and saw her own face on every channel. A news anchor asked, "Is this a sign that the military is interfering with law enforcement?" She turned it off and leaned back in her chair. Outside the window, Washington, D.C. glowed brightly, but inside her darkness stretched long and deep. On the desk, her phone lit up. An anonymous text appeared, only one short line: Hall did not act alone. Check the data log from his patrol car. Watcher. Amelia stared at the screen, her heartbeat quickening. Outside, thunder rolled, signaling another storm on the horizon. And this time, it would not just sweep away one officer, but an entire system. Evening draped Washington, D.C. in a heavy gray stillness, quiet, yet suffocating. Inside the Pentagon, Colonel Amelia Taylor moved quickly down the deep blue carpeted hallway, her steps firm but her eyes drawn tight like a wire. She had just left an emergency session of the National Security Council, where every man in uniform had avoided looking directly at her, as if one glance could make the storm outside rage stronger. More than 24 hours had passed since the bullet from Echo Unit ended Officer Derek Hall's life, and the American public was in an uproar. On television, her image was spliced, analyzed, distorted. One conservative network branded her a female soldier defying the law, while another called her a black woman bold enough to confront the system. But Amelia, standing at the center of the storm, only felt the haunting silence spreading through the military. Major Adrian Ross waited for her outside her office. His uniform wrinkled dark circles under sleepless eyes. Colonel Y checked Hall's vehicle data system. There was an unusual access. 2 hours before the incident, someone used an internal code to locate your license plate. Amelia froze for a beat. What internal code? It wasn't from the local police, Ross replied quietly. It came from the Department of Homeland Security. The air thickened. Amelia walked to the desk and turned on the large monitor. Lines of encrypted symbols filled the screen, one hidden access string marked with the clearance label Level 5, a security tier reserved for top-secret federal programs. "That means," she said softly, "Hall wasn't acting alone. Someone gave the order." Ross nodded grimly. "And whoever it was had national-level clearance." He hesitated, then handed her a flash drive. "And this is the deleted portion of Hall's personal file. I recovered it from a backup copy. He'd received payments from a private fund called Liberty Front Foundation. On paper, they support veterans, but if you read the final note closely," Amelia read slowly, "Community Police Support Contract Priority Region, preventing multi-ethnic infiltration of command structures." She looked up, her tone icy. "That's the language of purification ideology." Ross nodded again, unease flickering in his eyes. "We're talking about an organized network, not just a few extremists." Amelia fell silent for a long moment, then said, "Send all copies to the Counterintelligence Center, but through my encrypted channel. No one else can know." Ross nodded and left. When the door closed, Amelia leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. The scattered pieces were aligning into a larger picture, an infiltration reaching through both police and military ranks. And she, the first black woman to command the Eastern Strategic Division, might be just one link in their chain. She rose and walked to the window. From here, the white dome of the Capitol peeked through the thin mist. Every stone of that building carried an oath to justice, but Amelia knew better than anyone that justice did not always wear the face of law. The desk phone rang. A deep male voice spoke firm but tinged with tension. "Colonel Taylor, this is Richard Beck, Defense Communications Director. You need to prepare for tonight's press conference." "Press conference?" she asked. "Yes. You're to speak to the press, calm public concern. The president wants a clear message there is no conflict between the military and civilian law enforcement." Amelia closed her eyes, drawing in a slow breath. "And what exactly do you want me to say? That the shot was a mistake? That the man who died was innocent?" "You'll say what's been approved," Beck replied sharply. "Or you'll be suspended from command until the investigation concludes." The line went dead. Amelia stood motionless, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. She knew what that meant. They wanted her silence for the storm to pass, for everything to fade into the same oblivion as hundreds of other cases before. But not this time. That night, flashbulbs burst around the Pentagon entrance. Reporters shouted over one another, cameras sweeping across the security line. When Amelia stepped out, her black uniform gleaming silver under the floodlights, the crowd fell silent for a heartbeat. A young female reporter called out, "Colonel Taylor, is it true you ordered the shooting of Officer Hall?" Amelia stopped. Every microphone pointed toward her. "No," she said clearly. "I did not give that order. But if I have to choose between staying silent to protect reputation or speaking truth to protect justice, I will always choose the latter." The noise erupted again, hundreds of questions crashing like a wave. But in that instant, Amelia knew she had crossed into a new battlefield, not one of military strategy, but of truth itself. Later that night, back in her apartment, an anonymous email arrived. The subject line contained only 3 words: Project Purity, Phase 1. The attachment was a long list of names, ranks, and top-secret classifications. On the first line, Amelia's eyes froze on a familiar name: General Maxwell Reed, the man who had once brought her into the service, the man she had called mentor. A chill raced down her spine. She understood now that the bullet the previous night had not been meant simply to kill her. It had been a warning. And that night, Amelia Taylor realized the real war had only just begun. 4 days after the shooting of Officer Derek Hall, the air in Washington, D.C. felt thick, heavy, and charged like a city waiting for a storm. Every television broadcast replayed the same image of Colonel Amelia Taylor, calm face, black uniform eyes that seemed to see through the camera. The calmer she appeared, the more it unsettled those in power. Inside the underground conference room of the Counterintelligence Bureau, harsh neon light reflected off the glass table buried under files. Amelia sat at the head of the table facing 3 men, one from the FBI, 1 military inspector, and 1 legal advisor from the White House. They had summoned her to provide information for the investigation, but their tone was more interrogative than cooperative. Colonel, the military inspector, began his voice dry. "Do you confirm that the Echo unit operated outside your command authority?" "Yes," Amelia answered succinctly. "Then do you know why they followed you that night?" She looked straight into his eyes. "Because they received an internal distress signal. But the point is, that signal did not come from my phone. The room fell silent for a brief second. The FBI representative leaned forward. "Are you implying someone else accessed your tracking system?" "Not implying," Amelia said evenly. "I have proof." She slid a flash drive across the table. The large monitor flickered to life, displaying a list of access accounts. User ID HS3142DHS. A whisper broke the silence. "That's a Homeland Security code." Amelia nodded slightly. "Exactly. And if you trace the source, you'll find that this account has also downloaded data on over 30 senior officers of color." The room froze. "What exactly are you saying?" Colonel Taylor, the legal advisor, asked, his voice tight as wire. "Operation Purity." Amelia said each word deliberate. "A covert project funded by private foundations embedded inside security agencies to control the advancement of minority personnel. Officer Hall was merely the first pawn they activated in public." The FBI agent leaned back with a heavy sigh. "Colonel, that's an extraordinary accusation. Do you understand this could blow up the Pentagon and the White House at once?" Amelia looked at him, her tone calm, but her gaze cutting like glass. "I don't care who it destroys. I care about why I nearly died on my own soil while the man who aimed at me wore a badge of authority." That afternoon, as she left the counterintelligence headquarters, Amelia noticed a woman waiting near the exit, petite frame, short curly hair, sharp eyes behind thin glasses. "Colonel Taylor, I'm Elena Cruz, investigative reporter for the Patriot Journal. I think we're both hunting the same beast." Amelia frowned slightly. "You've been following me?" No, Elena smiled, a trace of challenge in her tone. "I've been following the one who wants you dead." Amelia didn't reply right away, but her instincts told her this woman knew more than she let on. They sat together in a small cafe across the street. Elena placed her phone on the table, the screen showing highway surveillance footage from the night of the incident. "I have a source in the Department of Transportation. There's something you need to see." The video played in slow motion. Hall's car appeared first, but behind it was another vehicle, its license plate intentionally blurred. "This SUV followed you for 14 miles, Elena said quietly. "When Hall turned on his lights, that car stopped exactly 200 meters behind, as if waiting for the outcome." Amelia went silent. "Who owns it?" "A private contractor named Helix Defense Logistics, officially a defense supplier. But the real owner is Liberty Front Foundation, the same name you mentioned in your meeting." A chill ran down Amelia's spine. Everything that had been speculation was now taking shape. An organization with money influence and insiders was manipulating both military and law enforcement from the shadows. Elena, Amelia said slowly, "If you keep investigating this, you'll be watched." "I already am," Elena replied with a dry laugh. "They cut power to my apartment last night and wiped my computer drive. Luckily, I had a backup. I think you need to see this." She placed a folder on the table, the cover faintly stamped with the words, "Project Purity Classified." Inside was a list of 22 officers and federal officials, all either Black, Latino, or Asian, each of whom had suffered a career incident over the past 10 years. Accidents, transfers, false allegations, suspensions without cause. In the corner of the file, one signature appeared repeatedly, General Maxwell Reed. Amelia's grip tightened on the folder until her knuckles turned white. She remembered the tall, calm voice, the mentor who had once told her on her West Point graduation day. "Never forget, Taylor. You don't just represent yourself. You represent everyone who comes after you." Now that same man was behind a conspiracy to erase everything she and her father had fought to reclaim. Elena looked at her and said gravely, "I can help you bring the truth to light, but I need you to protect me from the very system you once trusted." Amelia's voice dropped low but unyielding as steel. "If you're coming with me, remember this from now on, every truth we uncover might kill us both before it ever reaches the public." Outside, dark clouds gathered over the White House as the first drops of rain hit the tin rooftops. In the flash of lightning, the two women, one a soldier, the other a journalist, silently sealed an unspoken pact for a new war. And at that same moment, a Homeland Security satellite triggered an alert to mobile devices belonging to Amelia, and Elena had just been simultaneously located. Someone knew they were talking. Someone was listening. Night had fallen deep over Arlington. Inside the secure temporary apartment, the desk lamp cast a dim glow across Colonel Amelia Taylor's tired but alert face. On her laptop screen, lines of encrypted data scrolled like a rushing digital river files that Elena Cruz had sent her hours earlier, stamped with the seal Project Purity. Amelia read every line, every word, not skipping a single one. Each page was a blade, cutting through what little faith she still had left in the system she had served her entire life. The numbers did not lie. The suicides and accidents of black officers over the past 10 years all occurred right after they were nominated for leadership positions. Every report had been classified, sealed away from Congress, and at the bottom of each one appeared a signature of the devil itself, authorized by General M. Reed. Amelia sat in silence, her eyes dry and burning. General Reed, the man who had once taught her that discipline is the only faith standing between war and chaos, was in truth the one sowing chaos with hands that appeared spotless. She wondered how many men like him sat in well-lit offices across this capital, believing they had the right to decide who was worthy to exist in the nation's chain of command. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she said without looking up. Major Adrian Ross entered, rain still glistening on his coat-face grave. "Colonel, I found something." He placed a thin folder on her desk. "This is the movement log of Echo Unit from last week. The deployment order on the night of the shooting did not come from you." Amelia frowned. If not from me, then from who? Ross hesitated. From higher up. "The authorization code belongs to General Reed's office." She shot to her feet, the chair tipping back. "What did you just say?" "He signed an order deploying Echo to monitor you under the pretext of a potential internal extremist threat. But I verified that order doesn't exist in any official operations registry." Amelia paced the room, arms crossed tightly, her pulse pounding. "Reed used my own unit to kill a police officer to frame me and to create an excuse for a purge." God Ross nodded slowly. "It looks like he wanted to prove that units protecting minority officers are a threat that needs dismantling." The shooting was a public test of reaction. For a long moment, only the sound of rain tapping against the window filled the silence. Amelia stood before the mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman in uniform, a face hardened by battle, but eyes now carrying the sting of betrayal. "Ross," she said quietly, "prepare full personnel records for Echo Unit. I need to know who among them might have been bought." "Yes, Colonel." He paused, lowering his voice. "Do you really think they'll let you live long enough to do that?" Amelia gave a faint, weary smile, the kind of smile of someone who had already made peace with fate. "If my death makes people see the truth, then I've lived enough." The next morning, Amelia met Elena Cruz in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Baltimore, their chosen safe exchange point. Elena arrived early, clutching a thick stack of documents tied with cord. "I found more evidence," she said quickly. "A chain of wire transfers from Liberty Front Foundation to Helix Defense Logistics, the same company that tracked your car. Over $12 million in just 6 months. Enough to fund a nationwide spy network," Amelia murmured. Elena opened another file, her voice low. "Did you know Project Purity was renamed 2 years ago? It now operates under the code name Restoration Initiative. I found a list of 12 targets, all senior officials of color. And..." She hesitated, meeting Amelia's eyes. "Your name is at the top." Amelia said nothing. She stared into the dim warehouse, where a shaft of sunlight slipped through a crack in the door, painting a pale stripe across the floor. "If that's true," she said quietly, "this isn't an investigation anymore. It's a war." Suddenly, a metallic clatter echoed behind them. Both women spun around. A flash of movement, then a red laser swept across the floor. Amelia dove sideways, pulling Elena down with her. Gunfire ripped through the air sparks bursting from the concrete wall. "Run!" she shouted. They sprinted toward the back exit. Amelia drew her Sig Sauer from her jacket, firing back by instinct. One assailant dropped, but 3 more surged forward. The air filled with smoke and the sharp tang of gunpowder. The warehouse shook with chaos. Elena gasped for breath, her hands trembling as she raised her phone to record the firefight. "Who are they?" "Not civilians," Amelia shouted between gunshots, eyes tracking their movements, precise synchronized military, special forces. They burst through the back door into a flooded container yard. Sirens wailed in the distance, blending with the rumble of thunder. Amelia dropped the last pursuer with a single shot, then hauled Elena into a waiting pickup truck. As the tires screeched away, she looked back at the burning warehouse already set ablaze to erase the evidence. In the cab, Elena sat trembling, voice breaking. "They don't want the truth to get out." Amelia gripped the steering wheel, her eyes blazing in the dark. "They just confirmed our truth is so dangerous it has to be buried with us." Lightning flashed in the eastern sky, followed by one final crack of thunder. In the back seat, the files remained intact, soaked with rain, but unburned. Between the blood-stained pages, a bold line stood out: Project Purity Restoration Initiative, Phase 2, Destabilize Public Trust in Military Diversity. Amelia stared at the words, her hand tightening until her knuckles bled. She knew now that this fight was no longer about her rank, her name, or even her survival. It was about the future of the military itself and the soul of the country she had sworn to defend. That night, a violent storm swept across Washington, D.C. The wind whipping against the windows and shaking the walls of the safe house where Amelia Taylor and Elena Cruz were hiding. Lightning flashed again and again, illuminating the papers scattered across the table, the words Restoration Initiative standing out like streaks of blood on white pages. The 2 women sat in silence, the only sound the pounding rain against the glass, like the relentless ticking of time. Elena opened her laptop, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Look at this, Amelia. Every name on the elimination target list once spoke out against internal discrimination policies. There are ambassadors, judges, officers, and even a senator running for the Defense Committee seat." She looked up, eyes heavy. "This isn't just racial cleansing. It's political purging." Amelia rose and walked to the window. The lines of cars below looked like trembling ribbons of light in the rain. "I once believed the military was the only place where color didn't define worth," she said slowly. "Now I realize the discipline I worshipped was the wall they built to hide their prejudice." Elena closed her laptop softly. We can't release everything yet. If we do, they'll erase every trace and erase us with it. I need more verified data, especially testimony from the inside." Amelia turned, her voice steady. "I know someone who can help. An officer from Reed's staff. But meeting him will have to be silent and off the record." 2 days later, Amelia, dressed in civilian clothes, drove to an old training ground in Virginia once used by her Special Operations Unit. The wind swept through the dry grass like whispers of warning. She stopped in front of an abandoned red brick warehouse. Inside waited a man, Captain Andrew Mercer Reed's former aide. His face was pale eyes sunken from sleepless nights. "You shouldn't have come here," Colonel Mercer said, his voice trembling. "He knows you're alive, and he's wiping out everything." Amelia took a step forward, her gaze cold and sharp. "Then tell me, Captain, whose side are you on?" Mercer lowered his head. "I used to believe in Reed. I thought he was protecting the military from politics. But then I saw the list of those who were erased. They weren't threats. They were just people of color, or women. I couldn't stay silent anymore." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small hard drive. "This is the full restoration file, the entire plan. Phase 2 is about orchestrating false chaos shootings, riots, to make the public believe that diverse officers are the source of instability. Once fear spreads, they'll push for restructuring the military promotion system. Reed calls it restoring national order." Amelia gripped the drive tightly, and Phase 3, Mercer's voice dropped to a rasp. "They call it constitutional reset. Once the public believes the military has been infiltrated by disloyal elements, they'll push an emergency act allowing the Security Council to control the armed forces without congressional oversight." A chill ran through Amelia's body. A legal coup. Mercer nodded. "Exactly. And Reed will chair the Temporary Military Council." A sudden noise came from outside. Both turned. The warehouse door burst open, and 2 figures in black coats stormed in, suppressors raised. Amelia pulled Mercer down, returning fire. Gunshots cracked in the confined space, the smell of gunpowder mixing with damp air. One attacker fell, the other fled. Amelia didn't chase. She knew this was only a warning. Mercer was breathing heavily. "They found me. I can't go back." "You can come with me," Amelia urged. He shook his head. "If I disappear, they'll hunt you harder. But if I stay, I can stall them, buy you time." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes steady. "End this, Colonel. Don't let men like Reed decide this country's future." As Amelia drove away, the rain began to pour harder, each drop pounding the roof like the beat of fate. She unlocked her phone and sent an encrypted message to Elena, evidence secured. "Prepare for release." That night in Elena's apartment, the light suddenly went out. She turned on her phone, the screen's glow reflecting her anxious face. Amelia. No response. Only the sound of rain on glass, then footsteps echoing up the stairwell. Elena held her breath, clutching the hard drive. The phone buzzed. A message appeared. "Leave now." They traced the IP. She bolted for the back door just as glass shattered behind her. A bullet tore into the wall where she had stood. Elena ran through the downpour, heart pounding. At the corner, a black SUV waited. The door flew open. Amelia was behind the wheel. "Get in!" The car sped into the storm tires, skidding on wet asphalt. Behind them, 2 black vehicles gave chase. Amelia swerved sharply through narrow streets. "They've breached our security network," she said firmly. "From now on, nowhere is safe." Elena gasped, clutching the drive to her chest. "What do we do now we go public?" Amelia replied. "But first, We get to the old transmission station at Fort Belvoir. It has an isolated amplifier. Once we broadcast this data to the entire network, no one will be able to hide it again. The headlights behind them grew closer. Amelia slammed the accelerator, the engine roaring as they shot across an overpass. Rain and thunder merged into one relentless sound. For the first time, Amelia felt her fear dissolve, leaving only raw conviction. Justice never comes on its own. It has to be dragged from the darkness by those willing to burn their hands on the fire. And as their vehicle disappeared into the storm, the lights of Washington, D.C. still glowed bright, unaware that on this tempestuous night, history was beginning to shift. As a woman in uniform began her solitary counterattack against the very system that once honored her. The next morning, the sky was the color of ash, and a cold wind whipped through the bare trees lining the road to Fort Belvoir. Amelia Taylor and Eleanor Cruz had driven all night, stopping only once at a deserted gas station to change license plates. A thin red scratch traced across Amelia's cheek, dry and faint. She couldn't remember when she had gotten it. Maybe when dodging bullets. Maybe when the car skidded on wet asphalt. Everything now blurred together between adrenaline and resolve. How much farther, Elena asked, her voice hoarse. 10 miles, Amelia replied. But don't expect Fort Belvoir to still be safe. I used to serve there, but they've probably replaced the entire guard unit by now. Elena looked out the window, the drizzle clinging to the glass. If Reed really controls everything, he won't let us upload the data easily. That's why, Amelia said, her tone steady, we have to make him make a mistake first. They arrived just as dawn broke. The military base lay still, the main gate guarded by soldiers wearing unfamiliar insignia, not the usual military police. Amelia decided to avoid the main entrance. She led Eleanor through the abandoned eastern compound, where the old emergency communications hub still stood. This used to be the backup signal station, she explained, prying loose the wooden board blocking the door. It still runs independently if you use the right activation code. Inside, the air was icy thick with the smell of rust and damp dust. Amelia switched on her flashlight, sweeping over corroded panels and moss-covered machinery. Elena placed the hard drive on the table, her hands trembling from cold and fear. If I upload the entire file, it'll take about 3 minutes to reach the international server. 3 minutes can be a lifetime, Amelia said, eyes fixed on the window. Do it. Elena began typing. Lines of code filled the screen, scrolling endlessly. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic tapping of keys, blending with the rain hammering the tin roof. Amelia stood guard by the door, weapon ready, the scene feeling eerily familiar, a battlefield again, except this time the enemy carried no flag. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The power pulsed twice, then went dark. Damn it, Elena muttered. The auxiliary power's been locked remotely. Do you have a local copy? Yes, but if we lose the connection, the file won't transmit. Amelia scanned the room, then yanked down the manual breaker. The power surged back. She turned just as the screen flashed a message. Incoming connection, Pentagon node. Read, she whispered. The monitor blinked, and General Maxwell Reed's face appeared not live, but through a secure transmission. His expression was eerily calm. Amelia, his voice rang out low and precise. You've gone too far. I once saw you as the pride of this army. Now you're just a rogue pawn. Amelia stepped closer to the screen. And what does that make you, General A, traitor to your country, hiding behind the slogan of restoring order? Reed smiled faintly, arrogance glinting in his eyes. This country is rotting because of people like you using victimhood as a political weapon. I'm simply cleaning up the battlefield. By murdering the innocent, Amelia snapped. No one is innocent, Taylor. We're all pieces on a board. The only question is who controls the game. Elena cut in sharply. You won't control anything after today. Everyone will know the truth. Reed turned his cold gaze toward her. You think I don't know who you are, Miss Cruz? You once wrote that light is the enemy of darkness. Remember, this light also burns those who wield it the wrong way. The screen went black. At that exact moment, alarms blared across the base. Amelia understood instantly they'd been found. How much longer, she shouted. 70% Elena yelled back, fingers flying across the keyboard. The rumble of engines grew outside, armored vehicles closing in. Amelia raised her gun, peering through the cracked window. When it hits 100, run south. I'll hold them off. No, I'm not leaving you, Elena protested. That's an order. Tires screeched outside. Figures moved through the rain, rifles raised. Amelia fired the muzzle flashes, lighting the storm. She shifted positions, constantly shooting just enough to buy time. 90%, Elena cried. 10 seconds, Amelia reloaded. A bullet grazed her shoulder, blood running warm down her arm, but she didn't stop. The rain drowned out the pounding of her heart. Upload complete, Elena shouted, yanking the drive free. The data's out. Amelia tossed a smoke grenade and pulled Elena toward the back exit. They bolted into the storm, the wail of sirens and shouts echoing behind them. As their vehicle sped away, Amelia glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the transmission station erupt in a burst of light, a controlled explosion erasing all trace. They drove in silence for miles. When they reached Memorial Bridge, Elena finally spoke, her voice shaking. Do you think they'll believe it? The people, the press. Amelia watched the city lights shimmer across the Potomac River. Not everyone will, but if even one person believes, that's enough to start. Across the world, thousands of emails and videos began to appear simultaneously from mirrored servers. News outlets, social networks, and international channels all carried a name no one had heard before: Restoration Initiative. And at the end of the leaked document was the unmistakable digital signature of General Maxwell Reed. Amelia closed her eyes, leaning back in her seat, her breath slow and heavy. The battle was no longer hers alone. It was in the open now. But deep down, she knew men like Reed never surrendered. She whispered softly to herself, "Darkness has just been exposed, and it will strike back harder than ever." The news exploded like fire racing across dry fields. Every outlet, news sites, television channels, and social media broadcasted the Restoration Initiative files bearing the digital signature of General Maxwell Reed. The technical evidence released by Elena and Amelia's team left no room for denial. Public opinion split in two. Some demanded transparency, others shouted accusations of undermining national security. In the corridors of power phones rang endlessly, and the confident smiles once fixed for the cameras quickly faded into anxious glances. The White House was forced to respond. The president announced the creation of an independent investigative commission. But behind the official statement, calculations turned cold. Who would lose their seat? Who could still hold on to power? General Reed appeared on live television calm and composed, denying everything, calling the documents fabricated. But his denial collided with the unyielding precision of digital evidence. Access logs, transaction chains, intermediary servers as cybersecurity experts peeled away layer after layer of deceit, revealing a web of international funding and shell contractors. In the streets, protests erupted. Citizens held signs demanding justice, opposition groups shouted across police barricades, and officers flooded the city to maintain order. though inside the security forces themselves shock rippled as personnel files were reviewed. Many units were suspended, and some officers found themselves suddenly questioned over their own pasts. In the Safe House Hotel, Elena looked pale, but her eyes burned bright. She called sources, verified facts, reconstructed the timeline of evidence. Amelia, meanwhile, received messages of gratitude from those who had once been silenced. Even as she realized the danger had only grown, the masterminds could strike back with any means necessary. The congressional hearing became a national stage. The press hammered questions without pause. Witnesses presented evidence, and when General Reed entered the chamber, his gleaming uniform could not hide the sweat at his temple. He denied everything, but the cracks in his answers exposed the machinery that had protected him for years. Then came a shocking turn. A leaked internal recording revealed a payment approved by the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Defense proof that someone within the administrative hierarchy had exploited the system to legitimize transfers meant to conceal malicious intent. The revelation sent tremors through the committee and fueled a growing narrative. This was not just about one man's corruption. It was systemic. At the same time, analysts discovered a small but telling breach. A security satellite had gone offline precisely when the data was released. Some believed it was an accident. Others suspected it had been deliberate, a planted opening, designed to create chaos or deflect blame. The investigation expanded into multiple directions, tracing foreign bank accounts, shell companies, and an entire network of politicians and businessmen entangled in the scheme. Amid the chaos, Amelia received countless calls from comrades, from young officers to old classmates from West Point. Some wept, others stayed silent, and she remained calm like a lone vessel steady in the heart of the storm, knowing that every move from here could cost lives or topple an entire system. As night fell, crowds gathered outside the Capitol chanting for transparency and justice. Amelia leaned back in her chair, staring at the digital signatures glowing on the screen like blades in the dark, reminding herself that this was only the beginning. The enemy would strike back with fury, but she would not retreat. The truth had been brought to light, and that light had already shifted the course of the game forever. That evening, the Washington, D.C. sky burned crimson, as if warning of the final storm. The second congressional hearing ended in chaos when new evidence from the Cybersecurity Bureau confirmed secret transfers between Reed and the Liberty Front Foundation, along with a chain of emails proving he had personally ordered the neutralization of black officers who had been promoted. When the findings were read aloud, the chamber erupted in noise. Reporters surged forward, and those who once defended him fell silent. Reed was stripped of his position that very night and placed under military surveillance, yet the government knew that arresting him was not enough. The Restoration Initiative still had hidden branches embedded deep within the system. Amelia was offered temporary protective custody, but she refused to go into hiding. "If I disappear, they'll call me a traitor," she said. "I'd rather face the world." She appeared on national television recounting everything from that stormy night in Maryland to the moment she released the data. Her voice was low and steady, without anger or vengeance, only the exhaustion of someone who once believed in a betrayed ideal. The speech swept across the country, watched by millions, as thousands of officers signed petitions demanding a restructuring of the promotion system and a full review of all internal programs. In the midst of the public uproar, another shocking revelation emerged. Rudd had agreed to cooperate in exchange for partial immunity. He provided a list of 72 officials across the government and military who had accepted money or orders from the Restoration Initiative. The news hit like a second bomb, shaking the entire political establishment. Within 24 hours, 7 arrests were made, and multiple offshore accounts were frozen. That night, Amelia stood at the window of her new apartment, watching the crowd below carrying banners reading, "Justice for All," as they marched through the rain. Elena stepped beside her, gently, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You've won," she said softly. Amelia shook her head. "No one wins in battles like this. Only those who survive to explain why the blood was spilled." She gazed toward the Capitol, glowing through the storm, and murmured, "But at least this time, the truth is no longer buried." 6 months later, spring returned to the Capitol. The cherry blossoms bloomed along the banks of the Potomac, yet the air still carried traces of tension from investigations not yet concluded. Congress passed the Institutional Integrity Act, establishing the Commission for Military and Civil Rights Reform to oversee every internal program that had once been abused. At the center of that commission stood Colonel Amelia Taylor, no longer the one being questioned, but the symbol of awakening. On her first day entering the new meeting hall, Amelia faced dozens of young officers, faces of every color eyes shining beneath the glass ceiling. She looked at them and realized something 30 years of service had never shown her hope. "We are not here just to fix mistakes," she said. "We are here to rewrite the beginning." Her voice carried softly yet firmly like a pledge. Reed remained on trial, and his court proceedings had become a verdict for an entire generation of leaders who had hidden prejudice beneath the mask of honor. Witnesses' files and recordings were presented, and the image of him bowing his head before the public marked the fall of an old order. But Amelia did not attend. She chose instead to remain at the commission, reviewing reform plans and signing the orders to restore honor to dozens of officers once dismissed from service for the color of their skin or their gender. That evening, she went to Arlington National Cemetery, where the wind whispered through rows of white headstones. She laid a bouquet on her father's grave, the man who had taught her the pride found in defeat. A few rows away rested Officer Derek Hall, the man who had once pointed a gun at her, now buried in silence. Some had wanted the grave removed, but Amelia had opposed it. She believed justice was not about erasure, but about learning to face the wound so it would never reopen. As she left the cemetery, she saw a group of students raising a banner that read, "From Truth to Reform. The Taylor Reform." She smiled for the first time in months without sadness. Elena called to tell her that the documentary about the case had surpassed 10 million views. "You made people believe," Elena said. Amelia replied softly, "Not in me, but in the idea that America can still save itself." As night fell, she stood on the balcony of her office watching the city lights shimmer on the river's surface. A nation that had endured a painful cleansing was learning to breathe again. She whispered to herself, "Justice is never a gift. It is a duty." Then she turned back inside, continuing her report, preparing for the next hearing. Before shutting down her computer, she wrote the final line in her journal. "If you believe truth matters, speak it. Share it. Raise your voice. Because silence is complicity." She pressed send, and the message appeared on the Commission's Integrity Network. Beneath her post, thousands of people commented, hundreds shared. Through the night, their voices spread across the country, an echo answering her journey and a call to all continue. The story spread justice like speak, and never again let the truth be buried.